The morning sun cast long shadows across my veterinary clinic's waiting room as I reviewed the monthly financial statements for the third time. The numbers hadn't magically improved since yesterday. I sighed, running my fingers through my black hair, a habit I had developed during stressful situations. At 41, I thought I would have had it all figured out by now. "Dr. Patterson, your next appointment canceled," Sarah, my receptionist, called out. "You have an hour free if you want to take Max to the dog park. He has been restless all morning." I glanced at my German shepherd, who perked up at the mention of the park. His tail wagged hopefully, and those pleading eyes were impossible to resist. "All right, buddy, let's go." The Nairobi dog park was surprisingly quiet for a spring morning. Max immediately spotted a golden retriever and bounded over, his whole body wiggling with excitement. I watched as they began their playful chase when a melodic voice caught my attention. "Luna, be gentle with your new friend." I turned to see a tall blonde woman jogging toward us. She moved with a natural grace that made her seem to float rather than run. Her green eyes sparkled with warmth as she approached, and I estimated she was in her late 20s. "I'm Summer," she said, extending her hand. "And that golden ball of energy is Luna." "Riley Patterson," I replied, trying to ignore the unexpected flutter in my chest when our hands met. "The enthusiastic shepherd is Max." We watched our dogs play, and that's when something extraordinary happened. Summer tilted her head, as if listening to a distant conversation, then chuckled. "Max says Luna reminds him of his sister from the same litter. He hasn't seen her since they were puppies." I stared at her, bewildered. "How could you possibly know that?" "I'm an animal communicator," she said, shrugging as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "I know it sounds crazy, but I can understand what they're thinking and feeling." "I'm a veterinarian," I said skeptically. "I deal in science and medicine, not." I trailed off, not wanting to offend her by saying nonsense. Summer smiled, unfazed by my skepticism. "Science can't explain everything, Dr. Patterson. For instance, can science explain why your Max has been favoring his left hind leg slightly? He's telling me it's been bothering him for about 3 days. I froze. I had noticed Max limping subtly yesterday but hadn't mentioned it to anyone. Before I could respond, Max came limping over, proving her point. Luna followed, gently nuzzling his side. That's remarkable," I admitted, my scientific mind struggling to process what I'd just witnessed. "And please, call me Riley." "Well, Riley," she said, pulling out a business card, "if you're ever interested in combining traditional veterinary medicine with alternative approaches, I'd love to chat." Her smile held a hint of something that made my heart skip a beat. As I watched her walk away with Luna, I couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter would change my life. I just didn't know how much. The business card felt warm in my pocket, and despite my rational mind's protests, I knew I would be calling her soon. Max nudged my hand, his tail wagging slowly. "Don't you start," I muttered, scratching behind his ears. "I know what you're thinking." And for a moment I wished I really could hear what he was trying to tell me. The drive back to the clinic was filled with thoughts of green eyes and gentle smiles, and I found myself wondering if maybe, just maybe, there were some things science couldn't explain after all. 3 days after our encounter at the dog park, I found myself staring at Summer's business card while a particularly difficult case sat on my exam table. The German short-haired pointer had been brought in with mysterious symptoms that didn't quite add up, and all my tests had come back inconclusive. "What do I have to lose?" I muttered, picking up my phone. My fingers hesitated over the keypad before I finally dialed her number. Summer Adams speaking. Her voice was just as I remembered it, warm and confident. "Hi, this is Riley Patterson from the dog park." I tried to keep my voice steady and professional. "I have an unusual case that might benefit from your unique perspective." 30 minutes later, she walked into my clinic wearing a flowing summer dress that made her look like she had just stepped out of a fashion magazine. I led her to the exam room, trying to focus on the case rather than the way her presence seemed to fill the space. "This is Buddy," I explained, gesturing to the dejected-looking pointer. "His symptoms don't match any typical diagnosis, and his owners are getting desperate." Summer approached the dog slowly, kneeling beside the exam table. She closed her eyes and the room fell into an almost ethereal silence. After a few moments, she opened them again. "He says there's something stuck in his stomach. It's small and sharp, but not metal. He got it from chewing on his favorite wooden toy 3 days ago." I blinked, surprised. that wouldn't show up on an X-ray. Without hesitation, I performed an ultrasound, and there it was, a small wooden splinter lodged in his stomach lining. The surgery was successful, and as I closed up, I couldn't help but feel a mix of amazement and professional curiosity. "Would you like to grab a coffee?" I found myself asking as we watched Buddy wake up from anesthesia. "I'd love to hear more about how you do what you do." That coffee turned into dinner, and before I knew it, we were closing down the restaurant, deep in conversation about the intersection of traditional medicine and intuitive animal communication. Summer's passion for her work was infectious, and I found myself questioning my rigid scientific worldview. Our collaborative success with Buddy led to more cases together. Summer started dropping by the clinic regularly, often bringing lunch or coffee. I told myself it was purely professional interest that made my heart race whenever she walked through the door. One night, we found ourselves working late on an emergency case, a cat with severe anxiety that was refusing all treatment. Summer's gentle approach, combined with my medical expertise, finally got through to the frightened feline. "We make a good team," she said as we were cleaning up, her hand briefly touching mine as she passed me a file. The contact sent a jolt through my system that I couldn't ignore. "We do," I admitted, trying to maintain my professional composure despite the warmth spreading through my chest. As she gathered her things to leave, she paused at the door. "You know, Riley, sometimes the best things in life don't come with a scientific explanation." Her words hung in the air between us, heavy with meaning. I watched her walk to her car, the streetlights creating a soft halo around her blonde hair. My careful walls of professional distance were crumbling, and I wasn't sure I wanted to rebuild them. That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't stop thinking about how natural it felt working with her, how our different approaches complemented each other perfectly. But it was more than that, and I was finding it increasingly difficult to deny the attraction growing between us. Max, sensing my restlessness, hopped onto the bed and rested his head on my lap. "What am I getting myself into, buddy?" I whispered, scratching his ears. His tail thumped against the bed in what felt like approval, and I couldn't help but wonder if he understood more than I gave him credit for. The morning light filtered through my office blinds as I caught myself checking my phone for the third time in an hour. No messages from Summer. I tried to focus on the patient files in front of me, but my mind kept wandering to her smile, her gentle touch when handling animals, the way her eyes lit up when she talked about her work. "This is ridiculous," I muttered to myself. "She's 14 years younger than me." The age gap wasn't the only thing bothering me. There was also my professional reputation to consider. What would my colleagues think about me working with an animal communicator, let alone having feelings for one? Sarah poked her head into my office. "Dr. Patterson, Summer's here with lunch again." My heart did that annoying flutter it always did at the mention of her name. Summer walked in carrying 2 paper bags from my favorite deli. "I thought you might need a break," she said, setting the food on my desk. "You've been cooped up in here all morning." I tried to maintain a professional distance, but it was becoming increasingly difficult. The way she perched on the edge of my desk, the subtle scent of her perfume, the way she absently tucked her hair behind her ear, it all made my carefully constructed walls feel paper thin. "You don't have to keep bringing me lunch," I said, even as I reached for the sandwich she offered. "I want to," she replied simply, her green eyes meeting mine with an intensity that made me look away. "Besides, Max told Luna, he's worried you're working too hard." I laughed, despite myself. "Using my dog to spy on me now?" "Maybe," she grinned. Then more seriously, "Riley, why do you keep pushing me away?" The question caught me off guard. "I'm not." But the lie died on my lips as she moved closer. "Yes, you are," she said softly. "Every time we get close, you retreat behind your professional facade. I'm not blind to what's happening between us." Before I could respond, a crack of thunder made us both jump. Summer moved to the window, watching as rain began to pour down. "Looks like we're stuck here for a while," she observed. I joined her at the window, careful to maintain some distance between us. The storm had turned the afternoon dark, and lightning illuminated the sky in brilliant flashes. Another crash of thunder, and suddenly the power went out. "Damn," I muttered, fumbling for my phone's flashlight. In the dim light, I could see Summer's face just inches from mine. The air between us felt electric, charged with more than just the storm outside. "Riley," she whispered, her hand finding mine in the darkness. "Stop overthinking everything." Her lips met mine before I could protest, soft and sure. For a moment, I forgot about age gaps and professional reputations. I forgot about everything except the way she felt against me, the warmth of her kiss, the gentle pressure of her hand on my waist. When we finally pulled apart, the lights flickered back on, illuminating the reality of what had just happened. I stepped back, my mind racing with implications and consequences. "Summer, I started, but she cut me off. "Don't you dare apologize," she said firmly. "Don't diminish this by calling it a mistake." The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of routine appointments and paperwork, but I couldn't focus. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt her lips on mine again. By evening, I had convinced myself that maintaining professional boundaries was the only sensible course of action. But as I drove home that night, the taste of her still lingering on my lips, I knew I was fighting a losing battle. Max greeted me at the door, his tail wagging knowingly. "Don't give me that look," I told him, but he just tilted his head and whined softly. For the first time, I wished I had Summer's ability to understand what he was trying to tell me, although deep down, I probably already knew. The storm continued through the night, and as I lay in bed listening to the rain, I couldn't help but wonder if some forces of nature were simply too powerful to resist. A week after the kiss, I found myself packing for the International Veterinary Conference in Cape Town. The timing couldn't have been better. I needed space to think, to get my head straight. Of course, that plan fell apart the moment I saw Summer's name on the speakers list. The flight was long enough for me to rehearse all the reasons why getting involved with her was a bad idea. By the time I checked into the hotel, I had almost convinced myself. Then I saw her in the lobby, looking stunning in a tailored blazer and slim-fit pants, and all my carefully constructed arguments crumbled. "Fancy meeting you here," she said with that smile that always made my knees weak. "I was going to tell you I was presenting, but after last week," she let the sentence hang between us. "I'm sorry I've been avoiding you," I admitted. "I needed time to think." "And what did all that thinking accomplish?" She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Besides making you look exhausted." Before I could respond, we were interrupted by colleagues wanting to network. The rest of the afternoon was a blur of presentations and panels. I sat through Summer's talk about integrating animal communication with traditional veterinary practices, watching with pride as she handled skeptical questions with grace and intelligence. Later that evening, I found myself at the hotel bar, nursing a glass of wine and thinking about my failed marriage. 10 years wasted trying to be someone I wasn't, hiding behind professional success and social expectations. The real reason I was fighting my feelings for Summer wasn't the age difference or professional concerns. It was fear. "Your thoughts are so loud I can hear them from across the room." Summer's voice broke through my reverie. She sat down beside me, ordering a glass of wine for herself. "Want to talk about it?" And suddenly, I did. The words poured out, about my marriage, about growing up in a conservative family, about the years spent denying who I really was. Summer listened without judgment, her hand occasionally brushing mine in silent support. "You know what I hear?" she said when I finally fell silent. "I hear someone who spent her whole life trying to meet other people's expectations. When are you going to start meeting your own?" The conference passed in a whirlwind of stolen moments and professional obligations. Summer and I found ourselves gravitating toward each other despite my best attempts at maintaining distance. During breaks between sessions, we'd walk through the hotel gardens, discussing cases and sharing stories. On the last night, we ended up in my hotel room, supposedly to review presentation notes. The tension that had been building all week finally reached its breaking point. This time, when Summer kissed me, I didn't pull away. What followed was gentle and intense, a careful exploration of feelings we'd both been trying to deny. Summer's touch was tender, reverent almost, as if she understood the magnitude of what was happening between us. In the quiet aftermath, lying in her arms, I felt a peace I hadn't known I was missing. "You're thinking too loud again," she murmured against my shoulder. "I'm thinking that I'm too old for this kind of drama," I replied, but there was no real conviction in my voice. She propped herself up on an elbow, looking at me with those piercing green eyes. "Age is just a number, Riley. What matters is how we feel when we're together. Stop letting fear make your decisions for you." The flight back to Nairobi the next day was filled with a different kind of anxiety. Not about what others might think, but about what came next. Summer seemed to sense my unease, her hand finding mine during takeoff and not letting go until we landed. As we collected our bags, she turned to me. "Whatever you're worried about, we'll figure it out together. That's what partners do." Partners. The word echoed in my mind as I drove home, Max's excited greeting temporarily pushing aside my contemplation. But later that night, as I lay in bed, I realized Summer was right. I had spent enough time living for others. Maybe it was time to start living for myself. My morning routine was interrupted by an unusual email notification from my bank. Thinking it was just another automated message, I almost ignored it. Then the number of zeros caught my eye. I blinked, refreshed the screen, and stared at my account balance again. "This has to be a mistake," I muttered, quickly dialing the bank's number. After 20 minutes of verification questions and holds, the representative confirmed what seemed impossible. Someone had deposited $5 million into my account yesterday. My hands shook as I ended the call. The money was real, but its source was a mystery. My first thought was of Summer, who had stayed over last night and left early for a client appointment. "Dr. Patterson?" Sarah's voice crackled through the intercom. "Your 9 o'clock is here." I forced myself to focus on work, but my mind kept drifting to those numbers on my screen. During lunch, I called Summer. "Hey, beautiful." Her voice was warm, but I could hear the confusion when I explained the situation. "Riley, I wish I had that kind of money to give you, but I definitely didn't make any deposits to your account." The afternoon brought more confusion as my bank's fraud department called. They were investigating the transfer, which had been routed through several international banks before landing in my account. The source appeared to be from the Cayman Islands. "The Caymans?" I repeated, my stomach dropping. My ex-husband had always bragged about his offshore accounts there. This had to be connected to him somehow. By evening, Summer arrived at my place with takeout and a determined expression. "Talk to me," she said, setting down the bags. "You've been distant all day." I explained my suspicions about my ex-husband while we ate. Summer listened intently, occasionally asking questions that made me realize how little I actually knew about his business dealings during our marriage. "I should probably call him," I said reluctantly. "Find out what's going on." Summer took my hand across the table. "Whatever this is, we'll handle it together. But maybe we should talk to a lawyer first." She was right, of course. I spent the rest of the evening making calls, finally reaching a financial crimes attorney who agreed to meet first thing tomorrow. Later, curled up on the couch with Summer, Max sprawled at our feet, I tried to push away the anxiety creeping in. What if this money is connected to something illegal? What if I'm implicated somehow? "Then we'll deal with it," Summer said firmly. "But you're not alone in this, Riley." I looked at her, this amazing woman who had walked into my life and turned everything upside down in the best possible way. "I'm sorry for dragging you into my mess." "Stop apologizing," she said, pulling me closer. "I'm exactly where I want to be." A notification pinged on my phone. My ex-husband had finally responded to my message, but only with 2 cryptic words, "Keep it." "What does that mean?" Summer asked, reading over my shoulder. "I don't know," I replied, "but I have a feeling we're about to find out." That night, I barely slept. Summer stayed over, her presence a comforting anchor as my mind raced through possibilities. The money felt like a ticking time bomb in my account, but my ex-husband's message suggested something more complicated than a simple banking error. As I finally drifted off, Summer's arm draped protectively around my waist, I couldn't shake the feeling that this mysterious windfall was about to change everything. The question was, would it bring opportunity or disaster? The last thing I remembered before sleep claimed me was Summer's whispered assurance, "Whatever happens, we're in this together." In the midst of all this uncertainty, her words were the only thing that felt absolutely true. The morning news hit like a thunderbolt. My face was splashed across the local news websites, alongside headlines about suspicious international money transfers and potential connections to financial crimes. My ex-husband's name featured prominently, and somehow, they had dug up details about my personal life. "Local veterinarian linked to international money laundering scheme," I read aloud, my voice shaking. "Sources suggest Dr. Patterson's unconventional partnership with self-proclaimed animal psychic Summer Adams raises questions about the legitimacy of their practice." My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Colleagues, clients, even old friends from college were calling, presumably wanting explanations I couldn't give. I switched it to silent and tried to focus on the day ahead. Sarah met me at the clinic entrance, her face grave. 3 clients have already canceled their appointments. They're saying they don't feel comfortable bringing their pets here anymore. I nodded numbly, walking past her into my office. The space that had always been my sanctuary now felt suffocating. Max followed me in, resting his head on my knee as I sank into my chair. Summer called around noon, her voice tight with concern. "Riley, have you seen the news?" "It's everywhere," I replied, exhaustion seeping into my bones. "They're dragging your name through the mud, too." "I'm so sorry." "Don't you dare apologize," she said firmly. "This isn't your fault." But it was my fault, in a way. If I hadn't let her get close to me, her reputation wouldn't be taking hits alongside mine. The thought of her career suffering because of my problems was unbearable. That evening, I made a decision that felt like ripping my own heart out. When Summer arrived at my house, I couldn't meet her eyes. "We need to take a step back," I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "Until this blows over, it's better if we're not seen together professionally or personally." "No," Summer said simply, moving closer. "Absolutely not. Summer, please. Your career is just taking off. Being associated with me right now could ruin everything you've worked for. Do you really think I care about that?" She reached for my hand, but I stepped away. "Riley, look at me." I couldn't. If I looked at her, my resolve would crumble. "This isn't up for discussion. I need you to go." "You're pushing me away because you're scared," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "But I'm not going anywhere." "Please," I whispered, still not looking at her. "Just go." The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, I heard her move toward the door. "When you're done punishing yourself for things that aren't your fault, call me." After she left, I collapsed onto the couch, Max immediately climbing up beside me. He whined softly, and for once I didn't need Summer's gift to understand what he was trying to tell me. The next few days were a blur of legal meetings and damage control. My attorney advised me to lay low and avoid making any public statements. The money remained untouched in my account, a constant reminder of how quickly life could spiral out of control. Summer kept trying to reach me, but I maintained my distance. Each ignored call, each unanswered text felt like another wound, but I convinced myself it was for the best. She deserved better than to be caught up in my mess. One week after I pushed her away, I arrived at the clinic to find Luna, Summer's golden retriever, waiting outside my office. A note was attached to her collar. She insisted on coming to work with me today. "Says someone here needs her more than I do." I knelt beside Luna, burying my face in her soft fur as tears finally came. She nuzzled me gently, offering the same unconditional acceptance her owner had always shown. "I'm being an idiot, aren't I?" I whispered. Luna's tail thumped against the floor in what felt like agreement. Looking at the note again, I realized that in trying to protect Summer, I was only hurting us both. Maybe it was time to stop running and start fighting back instead. Just as the media storm around the mysterious money transfer began to settle, something unexpected happened. The Journal of Veterinary Science published a groundbreaking study about the measurable impacts of animal communication on treatment outcomes. My name and Summer's were prominently featured as pioneering practitioners in this emerging field. The publicity was immediate and overwhelming, but this time in a positive way. Requests for interviews poured in, not about financial scandals, but about our innovative approach to veterinary care. Our clinic's waiting list grew longer by the day. "Dr. Patterson," Sarah called out one morning, "National Geographic is online too. They want to feature our work in their next issue." I was still processing this news when Summer burst into my office, her face glowing with excitement. "Riley, have you seen the latest research citations? Our case studies are being referenced in veterinary schools across Europe." The distance I had tried to maintain between us evaporated as she threw her arms around me in celebration. For a moment, everything felt right again. Then my office phone rang. "Dr. Patterson," a familiar voice said, "I'm calling from the International Veterinary Board. We're interested in having you present your findings at our annual conference in London next month." As I hung up the phone, Summer was watching me with those knowing green eyes. "London, huh? That's quite an opportunity." Before I could respond, Sarah appeared in the doorway again, looking slightly nervous. "Summer, there's someone here to see you. They say they're your parents." The color drained from Summer's face. "They're supposed to be in Australia. They can't be here." But they were. Thomas and Eleanor Adams stood in our waiting room, looking exactly like the wealthy conservatives Summer had described. Her mother's perfectly coiffed hair and designer outfit contrasted sharply with the casual atmosphere of our clinic. "Summer, darling," Eleanor's voice dripped with forced sweetness, "we've been trying to reach you for weeks. When we saw the articles about your work, we decided to stop by on our way to the vineyard." I watched as Summer straightened her spine, transforming into someone I barely recognized. "Mother, father, this is Dr. Riley Patterson, my partner in the clinic." "Partner?" Thomas Adams's eyebrows rose slightly. "In what capacity exactly?" The tension in the room was palpable. Summer's hand found mine, fingers intertwining deliberately. "In every capacity that matters." Eleanor's perfectly composed face cracked slightly. "Summer, dear, perhaps we should discuss this privately, over dinner?" "Anything you have to say, you can say here," Summer replied firmly. "Riley and I have no secrets." What followed was an hour of thinly veiled disapproval and attempts at manipulation. They questioned everything from our age difference to the legitimacy of our work. Summer stood her ground, but I could feel her trembling beside me. After they left, promising to discuss this further, Summer collapsed into my arms. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I should have warned you they might show up." "Hey," I lifted her chin gently. "You have nothing to apologize for. We're in this together, remember?" That evening, as we sat on my back porch watching Max and Luna play, Summer's phone kept buzzing with messages from her parents. She ignored them all. "They'll try to discredit our work," she said finally. "They have connections in the veterinary world. They'll say I'm corrupting you with pseudoscience." I thought about the London offer, about our growing recognition in the field, about all we'd built together. "Let them try," I replied, pulling her closer. "We have something they can't touch, results." As the sun set over Nairobi, casting long shadows across the yard, I realized that sometimes the hardest battles aren't fought against external forces, but against the expectations of those closest to us. Summer had chosen to fight hers openly, proudly. Maybe it was time I did the same. Max and Luna curled up together nearby, a picture of contentment that seemed to mock human complications. Summer leaned her head on my shoulder, and for a moment, everything else faded away. We had each other, we had our work, and we had the truth of what we'd built together. Sometimes, that's all you really need. The London offer sat heavy on my desk, demanding an answer. 2 weeks at one of the most prestigious veterinary hospitals in the world, teaching their staff about our integrated approach to animal care. It was the kind of opportunity I'd dreamed about my entire career. "You should take it," Summer said, perched on the edge of my desk. She was trying to sound supportive, but I could hear the strain in her voice. I looked up from the letter. "What about you? The Stanford Research Center wants you to head their new animal behavior department. That's in California, Summer. Completely different continent." The distance between London and California felt like a physical presence in the room. We'd spent the morning avoiding this conversation, busying ourselves with patients and paperwork. 3 months, Summer said quietly. "They want me there for 3 months initially." She paused, fidgeting with the pen on my desk. We could make it work. People do long distance all the time. But we both knew it wasn't that simple. The London position could easily turn into a permanent role, and Stanford had already hinted at extending Summer's contract. We were being pulled in opposite directions by our success. "Maybe we should take some time to think about it," I suggested, even though the words felt wrong in my mouth. Summer stood abruptly. "Is that what you want? Time apart?" "No, that's not." I started, but was interrupted by Sarah buzzing through on the intercom. "Dr. Patterson, emergency case coming in. Dog with severe respiratory distress." The rest of the day was a blur of critical cases and difficult decisions. Summer and I moved around each other like dancers who had forgotten their choreography, professional but distant. By evening, the tension was unbearable. "We need to talk about this," Summer said as we closed up the clinic. "Really talk about it." I nodded, leading her to my office where we could have privacy. Max and Luna followed, settling into their usual spots by the window. "I don't want to lose you," I began, the words tumbling out. "But I don't want to hold you back either. This opportunity at Stanford could launch your career to new heights. And London could give you the recognition you deserve," Summer countered. But is that what really matters? The question hung between us. Through the window, I could see the Nairobi sunset painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. This city had become home, not just for me, but for us. What if we're looking at this all wrong? Summer suddenly said, her eyes lighting up with that familiar spark of inspiration. Why does it have to be either or? What do you mean? We've built something special here, Riley, something unique. Instead of running off to opposite corners of the world, what if we focused on expanding what we've already created? I leaned back in my chair, considering her words. You mean turn down both offers? I mean counter them, she said, moving closer. Propose collaboration instead of relocation. We could offer training programs, workshops, consulting services. Build our own center right here in Nairobi. The idea was both terrifying and exhilarating. That's a huge risk, I said, but I could already feel my pulse quickening with possibility. Bigger risk than letting each other go? Summer's voice was soft but determined. She had a point. Everything we'd built together, professionally and personally, had started with taking risks. Our relationship itself had been a leap of faith. We could lose everything, I warned, even as the plan began taking shape in my mind. Summer reached across the desk, taking my hand. Or we could build something extraordinary, together. The moment stretched between us, full of possibility and fear. Outside, the city lights were coming on, twinkling like stars against the darkening sky. Max raised his head, looking between us with those wise eyes that seemed to understand more than any dog should. Together, I repeated, the word feeling like both a promise and a prayer. Summer's smile lit up the room, but before she could respond, my phone buzzed with another emergency call. Reality wasn't going to pause while we figured this out. But maybe that was the point. Life didn't wait for perfect timing or easy answers. As we rushed to handle the emergency, I realized we'd reached our breaking point, but not in the way I'd feared. Instead of breaking apart, we were breaking through to something new, something uniquely ours. The choice was becoming clear, even if the path forward wasn't. Sometimes the biggest leaps require letting go of what you thought you wanted to grab hold of what you truly need. The call came at midnight. A baby elephant had been found abandoned near a wildlife reserve, severely dehydrated and refusing to eat. The rangers were desperate, having tried everything they knew. We need both of you, the head ranger said. Dr. Patterson for medical care and Miss Adams. Well, we've heard about your special abilities. Summer and I exchanged glances across my kitchen table, where we'd been discussing our plans for the joint center. Personal and professional lines had long since blurred between us. But this felt different. This was our first major case since deciding to stay in Nairobi. The drive to the reserve was tense with anticipation. Summer's hand found mine in the darkness, squeezing gently. When we arrived, the sight of the baby elephant broke my heart. She was barely standing, her small frame trembling with exhaustion. She's terrified, Summer whispered, moving slowly toward the calf. She saw her mother taken by poachers. She doesn't trust anyone anymore. I watched in amazement as Summer worked her magic, speaking softly to the elephant in a mixture of words and gentle sounds. Gradually, the calf's trembling subsided. Following Summer's guidance, I was able to approach and begin medical treatment. We worked through the night, Summer maintaining the emotional connection while I handled the medical aspects. By dawn, the baby elephant was accepting food and water. The rangers named her Hope. As the sun rose over the savannah, Summer and I sat together, exhausted but content. We really do make an amazing team, I said, pulling her close. She turned to face me, her eyes bright despite her fatigue. We do more than that, we change lives. Her lips met mine in a tender kiss that held both passion and promise. The success with Hope made headlines, bringing even more attention to our unique approach, but this time, we were ready for it. Our decision to stay and build something together felt more right with each passing day. Summer's parents even called to grudgingly acknowledge our success, though they still couldn't quite bring themselves to fully accept our relationship. It was progress, of a sort. One evening, as we watched Hope's latest video update from the reserve, Summer curled into my side on the couch. "Do you ever regret not taking those other offers?" she asked. I thought about London, about Stanford, about all the paths not taken. "Not for a second," I replied honestly. "Everything I want is right here." Max and Luna, who had been dozing nearby, perked up as Summer shifted to straddle my lap. Everything? She asked, a mischievous glint in her eye. What followed was a gentle exploration of familiar territory that somehow felt new each time. Summer's touch was electric, sending shivers down my spine as she traced patterns across my skin. In these moments, age differences and professional concerns melted away, leaving only us. Later, tangled in sheets and each other, we talked about the future, about expanding our practice, about teaching others our methods, about all the animals we could help together. You know, Summer said, tracing lazy circles on my stomach, I never told you why I really started working with animals. I propped myself up on an elbow, intrigued. Why? Because they love without judgment. They don't care about age or status or what society thinks. They just know what's real. Her words hit home, reflecting everything we'd been through together. From that first meeting in the dog park to building our joint practice, we'd faced judgment and skepticism. But like the animals we helped, we'd learned to trust what was real. Hope's success story became the cornerstone of our new venture. We began offering workshops combining traditional veterinary medicine with animal communication, drawing participants from around the world. Our waiting list grew longer, but we made sure to keep space for emergency cases like Hope. As we fell asleep that night, I realized that sometimes the most significant healing happens when you stop fighting who you are and what you feel. Summer had taught me that, just as she'd taught me to listen to the unspoken language of animals. In the quiet darkness, with Summer's breathing steady beside me and our dogs snoring softly on their beds, I felt complete. We had found our path forward, together. The truth about the mysterious money finally emerged on a quiet Tuesday morning. My attorney called with news that made everything click into place. Your ex-husband has been arrested in Singapore, she explained. He's been running an elaborate investment scheme. The money he transferred to your account was his attempt to hide assets before the authorities caught up with him. I sat in my office, letting the information sink in. Summer, who had been examining a patient next door, appeared in my doorway as if sensing my distress. The money, I said before she could ask. It was dirty all along. Martin tried to use me as his unwitting accomplice. Summer closed the door and came to perch on my desk, her usual spot when we needed to talk. What happens now? The authorities will seize it, of course. But my attorney says since I never touched it and reported it immediately, I'm in the clear. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. It's finally over. The news spread quickly through professional circles. Colleagues who had distanced themselves during the scandal called to apologize. The veterinary board issued a formal statement clearing my name. Even Summer's parents sent a surprisingly supportive email. That evening, as we walked Max and Luna through the park where we first met, Summer brought up something unexpected. You know, your ex-husband did us a favor. I looked at her incredulously. How do you figure that? The scandal forced us to face every possible challenge early in our relationship. Society's judgment, professional criticism, family disapproval. We've weathered it all. And we're still here. She had a point. The past months had tested us in ways most couples never face, and we'd emerged stronger. Meanwhile, my work with animal communication was gaining scientific recognition. A research team from the University of Cape Town had been documenting our results, and their findings were revolutionary. Summer's ability to understand animals wasn't just intuition, it was a measurable form of communication that could be studied and, to some degree, taught. Dr. Riley Patterson and Summer Adams have pioneered a groundbreaking approach to veterinary care, the research paper stated. Their integration of traditional medicine with enhanced animal communication shows promising results in treatment outcomes. The validation felt sweet, but not as sweet as watching Summer work her magic with our patients. She had a particular case that week, a rescue horse that had stopped eating. Within minutes of meeting the animal, she identified the problem. He's mourning his previous owner, she explained to the current owners. He needs time to accept that she's gone, but he's willing to try if you are. The horse's recovery was quick once the emotional barriers were addressed. It was just another example of how our different approaches complemented each other perfectly. One afternoon, while reviewing patient files, I found a note from Martin's attorney. He wanted to meet, to explain himself. I showed the letter to Summer. Do you want to go? She asked, her hand resting supportively on my shoulder. I thought about it for a moment, then tore the letter in half. No, that chapter of my life is closed. I'm only interested in writing new ones. She smiled, understanding exactly what I meant. We had built something remarkable together, professionally and personally. Our clinic was thriving, our methods were being recognized, and most importantly, we were happy. That night, as we prepared dinner together in my kitchen, now as much hers as mine, I realized something profound. The money that had once threatened to destroy everything had instead revealed the strength of what we had built. "Summer," I said, watching her chop vegetables with the same careful attention she gave to everything. "Thank you for not giving up on me through all of this." She put down the knife and turned to face me. Giving up was never an option. Animals aren't the only ones who know what's real when they see it. Max and Luna, curled up together in their corner, raised their heads as if in agreement. Sometimes, I thought, the simplest truths come from our four-legged friends. Love is love, trust is trust, and loyalty, when it's real, doesn't waver in the face of storms. Our joint animal wellness center opened its doors on a crisp spring morning, exactly 1 year after we first met in the dog park. The renovated colonial building stood proud, its fresh paint gleaming in the morning sun. Patterson Adams Animal Wellness Center read the elegant sign above the entrance. Summer squeezed my hand as we watched our first clients arrive. "Can you believe we actually did it?" The center was everything we'd dreamed of and more. Traditional veterinary services merged seamlessly with animal communication therapy. We had specialists from around the world applying to join our team, drawn by our unique approach and proven results. The morning passed in a blur of appointments, each one reinforcing that we'd made the right choice in staying in Nairobi. Our methods were changing lives, both human and animal, in ways we'd never imagined possible. During lunch, Sarah brought in a special delivery, a large envelope from the International Veterinary Association. Inside was an invitation to present our integrated approach at their next global conference, not as guests but as keynote speakers. "They want us to train other practitioners," Summer said, reading over my shoulder. "Both of us together." The recognition felt right. Not because we needed validation, but because it meant we could help more animals, reach more people. Our work was creating ripples that extended far beyond our clinic walls. That afternoon, I had a surprise planned. I'd arranged for all our regular clients to gather in the dog park where Summer and I first met. Max and Luna were in on it too, wearing matching bow ties that Sarah had helped me prepare. "What's going on?" Summer asked as we approached the park. "Why is everyone here?" The setting sun painted the sky in shades of pink and gold as our friends, colleagues, and even Summer's parents gathered around. Max and Luna bounded forward, carrying a small velvet box between them. "Riley," Summer breathed, realization dawning in her eyes. "What are you doing?" "Something I should have done months ago," I replied, taking the box from our dogs. "You taught me to trust what's real, to listen to my heart the way you listen to animals. And my heart has never been more certain about anything." Kneeling in the grass, surrounded by the people and animals we'd helped together, I opened the box to reveal 2 matching rings. "Summer Adams, will you build forever with me?" Her answer was lost in the happy barking of dozens of dogs, but her kiss told me everything I needed to know. The cheers and applause from our gathered friends barely registered as I slipped the ring onto her finger. "You planned all this?" she asked, laughing through happy tears. With a little help, I gestured to Max and Luna, who were prancing proudly nearby. They kept the secret admirably well. Summer's parents approached, her mother dabbing at her eyes. "We were wrong," her father said simply, "about everything. You've built something remarkable here, both of you." The celebration lasted well into the evening, with impromptu speeches and countless congratulations. But my favorite moment came later, when Summer and I were alone in our backyard, watching the stars come out. "You know what this means?" she said, her head resting on my shoulder. "We're officially stuck with each other." "Damn right we are," I replied, pulling her closer. "And I wouldn't have it any other way." Max and Luna curled up at our feet, their contentment mirroring our own. In the quiet of the evening, surrounded by the life we'd built together, I finally understood what Summer had been trying to tell me all along. Love, like the connection she shared with animals, doesn't need explanation or justification. It simply is. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, it leads you exactly where you need to be.